Thank you very much, Michael, first of all, for inviting me. Thank you all for attending, and thank you, Judith, for providing such an excellent overview of the issues. I'm very fortunate to follow Judith because she has really cut the trail, and all I really need to do is just add a bit of commentary on the many points that she's made, almost all of which I agree with. I expect that as economists, we start off from the premise that ideas are a public good. And by public good, I simply mean that everyone can have more of them without anyone else having less. The unfortunate fact of life is that that applies not only to good ideas, but also to bad ideas. And that is particularly true in the area of public policy. And that makes it absolutely crucial that in that area of public policy there be a high level of contestability and a very strong quality debate. How do we measure in that respect? Judith has made the key points here, and so let me merely agree with almost all of the points she makes and then add a bit of gloss to a few more. I'm always struck by how much focus there is in Australia on issues of economic policy relative to the debate in most other parts of the world. It's striking that if you look at Le Monde or the Corriere della Sera, even at the moment, in the midst of the turmoil that is affecting Europe, it's rare that issues of economic policy, as we would regard them, would be on the front page. And even where the issues being discussed are issues of economic policy as we would see them, so for instance today's Le Monde has the headline 10 days to save the euro. The unfortunate fact is that they had that headline a month ago and 2 months ago. But nonetheless, when you look at what the article actually says, what it basically talks about is the future relationships between France and Germany and the relationships between Sarkozy and Merkel, rather than the substance of the dramatic choices that Europe faces. In my view, that focus on economic policy issues is a long-standing feature of Australia. Indeed, almost an eccentricity or a peculiarity of Australia by international standards. And I believe that that's really the result of two things. The first, that the ideological cleavages which dominate public policy discussion, certainly in Europe, have historically been much weaker here, vacating the field for a debate much more focused, often unfortunately focused, on distribution issues and hence on economics. And second, and related to that, the fact that precisely because the distributional conflicts were so acute in Australian history, we developed institutions to deal with and attempt to channel those distributional conflicts, to insulate the political process from the weight that those conflicts would otherwise have brought to bear on it, and to do so through a formalization or quasi-judicialization of key decisions by institutions such as our industrial relations system, our tariff board, which later became the Industries Assistance Commission, and then through to the Productivity Commission, and so on. Indeed, Australia is, at least to the best of my knowledge, absolutely unique in being the only country that has in its constitution provision for an interstate commission that was intended to be a kind of variant of what the Productivity Commission ultimately became. And those institutions, precisely because they wanted to formalize and channel to find ways of diffusing and managing distributional conflict had to devise rules, ideas, standards by which competing claims would be judged. And as a result of that effort, focused attention on economic insights and economic disciplines, not always terribly well, and more often than not to bad effect, but focused attention on those in a way that in other countries, where the distributional conflicts, in a sense, built up into the core political system, that didn't happen. As a result, it's unsurprising when you go back over the record of, for instance, economists who visited Australia over the course of the 20th century, how frequently those economists, and I'm talking of people of great insight and ability, such as when Lindahl came to visit what was ultimately the Reserve Bank, how struck Lindahl was by the fact that in Australia economists seemed important and the economic debate seemed important, though he noted that the economic policy did not seem to adequately measure the quality of the inputs it received. So that is a historical feature, and a feature that I think remains to the present day, not least because of the institutions that Judith referred to. I also agree with Judith that there have been some areas of progress and some areas of strength. So yes, it's true. We do have reasonable public disclosure in some areas of policy. And the MyEFO is a good development, though I actually don't think MyEFO is all that different from the planning and budgeting documents that are now quite common in the advanced economies. Indeed, relative to those documents, it has a number of weaknesses. For instance, it doesn't clearly articulate the basis for the alternative estimates or the sensitivities with respect to alternative estimates of the base case when you abstract from policy decisions. There's one result of that, to my mind, is that though we have reasonable disclosure, we have inadequate testing of that material. And again, the macroeconomic policy area is a case in point. We don't have the degree of internal contestability of macroeconomic advice that, rightly or wrongly, is now quite common internationally. So again, looking at the MyEFO, if you take, for instance, the Swedish Fiscal Commission, which is a statutory independent body that reviews documents such as MyEFO and issues its own opinion on those, I would have thought an entity such as that, which had equal access to, as the National Treasury, had the same access as the National Treasury to the underlying models, and had unlimited access to the assumptions and the modeling that had been done to generate the budget estimates. That sort of entity then plays a very important role in making clear some of the limitations, assumptions, and consequences of the decisions that have been taken.